Today on Ministry Monday, I'm speaking to Sean Holland. Hi, Sean. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Thank you for talking with us on the podcast today.
Good to be here.
Now, if people don't know who you are or what you do, Sean, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Well, I live in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm a uh, part-time music director at Holy Cross Parish in Kansas City, and I also I'm the organist for another parish, St. Anthony's down the street. So I play one mass, then rush over, do the other one. So there's kind of a twofold thing there. And then I'm a full-time manager at a local garden center greenhouse. It's one of the biggest ones in the region. We're open all year, and we we're on 40 acres, so it's a lot to uh, um, manage and coordinate and supply. And we've got a pretty good full-time staff that we hold on to all year. So um, a lot of work there, and sometimes it coincides with uh, the busy time, depending on when Easter falls. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
this year I'm excited because Easter's a little earlier, so I will be
Mm-hmm.
less busy, and
Mm-hmm.
that's I'm looking forward to that.
Now, as a gardener, I have to ask, what zone are you in?
We are in six
Okay.
zones, right on the line here in Kansas City.
Yeah, okay. I
Yes.
am 6A, I believe.
We are also 6A.
6A. Okay. So yeah, so Easter this year is only like potato planting time, right? It's
Everyone
minimal.
comes in and thinks, "Oh, Easter, it's time to plant." It's like, well, Easter can
Mm-mm.
be a month apart.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm. Totally. Well, okay, so then if you
yes.
don't mind me asking,
hmm
what came first, the gardening center career or the pastoral music career?
Well, I when I was in college down at the University of Missouri, I was studying landscape design at the ag school there, and I had played a little bit of organ, a little, just a little bit dabbled, and had a lesson once in a while with someone back home at the Presbyterian church, and she had encouraged me to find somewhere to practice. And I'd been going to masses sometimes at the Newman Center there, and I reached out and said, "Hey, do you guys have an organ that I could practice on once in a while?" And you know how music directors are, and music director there, Joe, just he was a heck of a recruiter, and he managed to get me in, and then how that's all she wrote really. And then I started
Mm-hmm.
doing more and more masses, and
Mm-hmm.
um, then when I left college, a part-time job was open at a church that at Holy Cross where I had been helping out over the summers,
Mm-hmm.
and that made an easy way into that, and it was kind of that was available, so I took that, and then
Mm-hmm.
about a year and a half later, the job at Suburban Greenhouses opened up, and I managed to um, make that balance out and work out. So
Very cool. Very cool. Wow.
that's
So
that story.
that that's your story and you're sticking to it.
That's right.
So you have a unique perspective. And the title of this conversation that are having today is ministry versus day job, right? So from your vantage point, from your perspective, what are some of the hardest things you have found about working full time and also serving as a music minister?
Finding balance
Hmm.
and avoiding overworking and burnout. That's really tricky to do sometimes, especially as kind of the high church seasons um, get closer and closer. We're preparing for Advent, or not Advent, we're preparing for Lent right now. So it's winter time, it's kind of downtime at the greenhouse. That's not a problem. But as we get closer to Easter and Holy Week, um, that becomes more and more of a challenge. And then in the fall and leading into December, that can be kind of a challenge too, because those are, your busy times, more rehearsals, more coordination, more problems that pop up that you have to deal with, in the ministry side of things,
Right.
because it seems like that's those are the seasons where things tend to go wrong and people, have to back out of gigs and,
Right.
whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
balance and overwork and burnout, those are kind of they're all related, and that's the challenge.
So then How do you find that balance? What are some of the things you implement or try to implement?
I try to stick to my calendar as much as I can. I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I do liturgical planning, I try and plan in blocks so that way I'm not exhausting myself every week doing little things. I can kind of get the block planned out and then make adjustments as, things pop up. But I'll do, kind of big seasons. I do 4 big schedules a year and try and stick with that. And like I said, then I make adjustments. That kind of helps me manage that time. Um, but once again, sticking to that calendar, trying to leave work at work when possible. I'm lucky, I can't do a whole lot of work at my greenhouse job from home. The plants
Right.
are in the greenhouse, so I can't do a whole lot of that from home. So
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't follow me. But
Mm-hmm.
there are times where late at night I'll just be working on something, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, it's midnight,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm exhausted, and then I'm tired the next morning, and so
Mm-hmm.
you know, musicians, we kind of get carried away sometimes and
Mm-hmm.
um, focusing on getting the job done. And so you have to kind of respect yourself that way and realize that you need to set those boundaries for yourself on time management.
Have you found that you have strengthened your skill of saying no?
Yes,
That would
that's a
be.
great question. That is a great question. I I do prioritize things a lot more. It's kind of like when someone asks me for something, it's like, okay, well, on a 1 to 10, do I need to be there for this, or is this the sort of thing where I can have a substitute um, fill in for? Because you kind of have to pick your battles, as it were, to when to take off work from the day job because they want you there, and that's your main gig. That's where my retirement and my um, health care and everything, it's
Hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So to them, they're my priority. The church, of course, things come up, but there are times where I have to say no to a funeral or a wedding and pass
Right.
that on to somebody else. And, you hate doing that, but if we've all had it where we have, seems like 2, 3 weeks in a row where we have, funeral after funeral, and
Oh,
it's
yes.
exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And then if you're doing those before your shift at work every day, it's even
Uh,
more exhausting.
mm-hmm.
So, that kind of goes back into respecting your time, your
Mm-hmm.
own time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you have to kind of explain to both employers your situation? Do you find yourself ever doing that? Because I can imagine that in the gardening center, you have to say, oh, I have to go do a funeral. And that's probably not something that people hear all the time.
No, no. When I get a call from the funeral home on my phone too, and they hear us talking about things, and people that don't know, it's really kind of interesting. They're like, "What? What?"
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, and then they find out real quick what I do on the side. But
Right. Mm-hmm.
it is there's a lot of communication that has to go on
Mm-hmm.
between both sides of
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
of my career.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Lucky for me, my employer is a very big proponent of the arts and of music and of classical music, and so as long as I'm not abusing, we've never had to say, "Oh, well, you're doing too many weddings, too many funerals," but I've worked there for 12 years. I understand, I can't go do a wedding on Mother's Day weekend. It's just not going to happen because it's flower planting weekend. It's kind of like asking for Christmas Eve off.
Yes.
There's, so
Yes.
you kind of have to recognize
Mm-hmm.
those instances
Mm-hmm.
in your career and in your day job, your primary job, so that way you can kind of toe that line of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I seem to have had about a lot of funerals lately. I probably need to not be gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to balance that each employment has its highest, most important
Hmm.
days.
Hmm.
And you're totally right. In Zone 6A, Mother's Day weekend is the weekend very often
Exactly. That's right.
to garden. It's very true. I
Hmm.
didn't think about that. So then do you have to explain then to your employer for gardening, like, hey, I have to take part of maybe Holy Thursday and Good Friday
Hmm.
off? Like, do you have to explain that too?
Yes, I used to, and now it's, we've got that relationship of trust, and we don't have to have that conversation every year. I always
Mm-hmm.
remind my immediate supervisor, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving early the next 3 days because of these things," but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and he's cool with that because we've discussed it, and
Mm-hmm.
he knows that I'm not abusing it. It's just one of those trade-offs, and I've got
Mm-hmm.
a great staff that I'm
Mm-hmm.
blessed with them. A couple people, one person on my staff used to be a Baptist um, youth pastor, and so she
Oh,
totally gets it.
yeah,
She's
of
like, "Oh, yep."
course.
She says, "I see Easter's this weekend, so I guess I'll be working the late shift to cover all of your shifts." I said, You got it, you know. So she just
Wow.
knows those things,
Mm-hmm.
and it just works out. I know that some people, out here listening may not have that rapport or recognition um, that what you do outside of that place of your place of employment is important. They see it as, oh well, you have to go do a funeral gig, but
Mm-hmm.
um, that comes back into having that conversation,
Mm-hmm. Well,
open communication.
I'm glad you said that because that was my next question. If someone is listening, we're going to kind of do this in the inverse. So first off, my question was for someone who might be listening who might be working full-time elsewhere and is
Hmm.
working part-time serving as a music minister. How can someone establish boundaries and limits with a parish when serving as a part-time music minister while also working full-time elsewhere?
Okay. Um, I once again, communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that that starts and ends with that, really. Um, Whenever I have a new pastor come on board, which we had a upheaval a few years ago, and that happened a lot. It seemed like we went through a bunch of administrators really fast, and each time I had to have this conversation. It kind of made me good at having this conversation, and but kind of nicely and politely spelling out that one of the things that allows me to be able to do ministry in this parish is to have a livelihood outside of working in a church, because
Mm-hmm.
we all know that that's, we all do it for the money because church pays so well, right? You know.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, yeah, it's for the millions we make playing the organ. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but um, by having a full-time job, it takes off of their plate having to find someone and negotiate a higher salary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in an inner city church, and so we don't have the resources.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of people that are chomping at the bit to go down and play bilingual masses and cantor from the organ, different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you almost have to sell like you're in a job interview, almost like these are the things that I'm bringing to this parish.
Mm.
But by working outside of this church, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, it allows me to be able to do these things
Right.
for this parish.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and most of them agree over, sometimes it takes some time to find that value, but
Mm-hmm.
they end up agreeing that we it's worth having that balance. I may
Mm-hmm.
not be able to go do St. Joseph's Day Mass because of something, but
Right.
it uh, um, it balances out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like you just have to almost remind people because it is kind of a paradigm shift
Hmm.
in certain contexts.
Because your faith is, we're doing ministry. That's a priority to us,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
really.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some that really think that we should give up all else to do that, but that's, at the end of the week, when the bills come due, that's not always possible. So, um,
That's true. That's true. Now I'm going to ask you another question on a similar vein.
mhm.
So, to those who are listening, some might actually be in the inverse. We in the national office have noticed a trend in employment where full time jobs are being like categorized or advertised as part time employment, even though it's 5, 6 liturgies a weekend, 50,
Oh,
60
yeah.
funerals a year, 30
Hmm.
weddings, 2 choirs. Like, how can one establish the value of a full-time position when maybe parish leadership sees it as a part-time workload, but quite frankly, it's not?
Yeah, when you see a job description come through on the Nationals job postings, and it's, like you said, there's like 500 bullet points. This is what you're responsible for.
Yep.
And it's first, it's kind of an unjust situation that you're putting your applicants in.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, but
Mm-hmm.
then you have to have that conversation um, with that pastor on like prioritizing what's on that list, the things that they
Mm-hmm.
say you would be responsible for, versus the hours that they're going to allot for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one.
I mention it too because I see part of this being part of our conversation because we come across parish job descriptions that say they want to make sure that this person is the sole organist for all the funerals. But as everyone on this call knows, you have to leave your schedule completely wide open during the week for funerals. And as you mentioned, it's been my experience that you get no funerals, no funerals, no funerals, then 4 funerals in a
Oh.
week, right? I mean, someday we will know in divine wisdom why that happens, but it
Hmm.
does, right? And so it's hard for us as sacred musicians, as pastoral musicians, to keep that as a full-time, to keep it as a part-time job with expectations as a full-time job,
Exactly. Yeah.
to keep that open.
It is. Because like you said, we plan for weddings at months in advance.
Right.
You know when those are going to be.
Right,
But,
exactly.
but funerals, I mean, you just don't know. I haven't had one
Mm-mm.
for quite some time,
Yep.
and hope, God forbid I have, but that's usually what happens, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, and then you have three or four in a row,
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to get that balance.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you might have to, I haven't had this problem, but my advice would be to maybe have that conversation with your pastoral leadership about scheduling, and things may conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to have that backup plan. Let them know that you would have a kind of your core group of people that you would call on if you were unavailable for something,
Mm-hmm.
that I've got my usual three or four that if something comes up, I know
Mm-hmm.
I can call on them. They've, they understand how, my parish works. They've worked with my pastor, so there's no surprises.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because, even though it's liturgy and it's all spelled out in the rubrics what we're supposed to do, sometimes there's always a surprise. Every priest kind of does it a little different. Those little nuances, and but kind of establishing with your leadership that you have your usual go-to people that understand how this parish does things, how your parish operates, and
Mm-hmm.
they can jump in
Mm-hmm.
and minister at a beautiful um, funeral mass or wedding mass,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no tension, or
Mm-hmm.
the family may not even have any idea
Right.
that what happened behind the scenes to get that's not the regular person or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think best case scenario is that they don't know anything's different.
Exactly. That's the
Yeah.
best case scenario.
Yeah.
Like, well, where's
Mm-hmm.
Sean this week? We wanted Sean. Usually, if if a family's requesting me directly, they say that, so that
Mm-hmm.
way,
Right. Right. Yeah,
um,
we get those too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so then my last question to you is if someone, and again, I'm just going to kind of flip it on its head.
Hmm.
Um if someone is listening and maybe they're in full-time ministry and they want to be in part-time ministry and
Mm.
they're looking for the opportunities, or I should say like transferable skills for going in another direction to kind of maybe not do music ministry full time, but doing it part time and doing something on the side. Do you see benefits in what you do? I mean, I understand the challenges of trying to balance
Hmm.
it all, but do you see benefits of you kind of maintaining those two careers, those two career paths?
Yes. So a couple of those benefits are, we are all in ministry. We understand how the church works, and sometimes leadership changes, and then shortly thereafter, staffing changes.
Hmm.
And, that's a whole nother discussion,
Mm-hmm.
between clergy and employees. But
Mm-hmm.
I sleep better at night myself knowing that all my eggs aren't in the same basket,
Yeah. Mm.
if that makes
Mm.
any sense.
Oh, it does.
Something happens, um, in the church. You can even have no change in leadership, but over time, the budget at the church can change, or the
Mm.
financial stability of a church can change. So
Mm-hmm.
your positions need sometimes. You and I talked about it earlier, before we started. Positions can kind of be cut back a little bit
Mm.
sometimes, and
Yes.
then you have to go find something, almost
Mm-hmm.
out of necessity, but you don't want to leave your community
Yes.
where you've
Yes.
been ministering.
Of course. Right.
Um, and so there is a value to, in that case too. And it kind of opens up, if you're going part-time, it can open up some to where you may not be, um, booked for all of every single wedding, funeral. You'd end up with a little bit more, free time if for your family or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what your other career
Right.
that you choose to
Right.
go, pursue would be.
Well, I mean, I'm having this conversation, and I'll admit I am that person. I went to school
Hmm.
for sacred music. My undergrad and my master's are in music. I worked full time for 13 years as a director of music, and I'm very very blessed that when the position at NPM opened, I'm able to work full time during the week for the national office, and then on the
Hmm.
weekend serve in whatever capacity feels right to me at this moment. And I say it that way too
Hmm.
because some of the listeners may not realize, or maybe they maybe realize that I have a small child. And so
Hmm.
my motivation intrinsically for the career change to go part-time with ministry and full-time with NPM was that I wanted to see my kid open up his Christmas gifts on Christmas morning
That
because
is very valid.
right? Yeah, and I
You don't have
wanted
a
to
sunrise mass to go be at.
yes, exactly. And I wanted to do the same thing for Easter. Now, I'll admit to you,
Mhm.
that's not the case always because, like in ministry, we end up getting pulled in different directions. And I'll admit that I've missed a few since then. But I will say that what you say, though, tracks because then
Hmm.
you're able to at least find a tad more balance. But again, it does come with its own challenges to work both positions, like you're saying. But
Right.
a good example too, though, is during the pandemic. I don't know how it was for you in Kansas City, but where I am in Pennsylvania, masses could not happen in person immediately in March of
Hmm.
2020. And in our diocese, the first people that got furloughed were the musicians because we weren't
Hmm.
having mass in person. And so there a lot of people were let go temporarily, but
Hmm.
temporarily became months. And so there were quite a few sacred musicians in my diocese who went and did something else because they needed to pay the
Hmm.
bills.
Exactly. And they may have found, some, that they enjoyed what they were doing, and then
Mm-hmm.
kept in that line too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a good conversation to have because one, I mean, I'm an advocate of always being a lifelong learner. So if
Hmm.
someone wants to develop transferable skills, I think that's a wonderful idea. I think,
Hmm.
again, though, if you're in the inverse, and let's say also you might be listening and you want to actually go more into parish ministry, maybe you didn't go to school for music. You can work on professional certifications,
Hmm.
music certifications.
Exactly.
I'm a big advocate of the certification programs in general,
Hmm.
between AGO and NPM in particular.
Hmm.
But either way, I think what like this conversation is really embodying a lot, not all, but a lot of what church music ministry looks like these days is
Hmm.
balancing serving the church, but also maybe having an employer in another field as well.
It really it most of the parishes in my diocese it's a part-time position. There's a handful
Mm-hmm.
where it's full-time. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's some where, they post it and they're like, well, we're never getting anybody. We can't get anybody. Can't get anybody. I'm like, well, that's because you're like you mentioned, your one ad is 30 pages long, but you're only advertising for 12 hours a week.
Right.
And
Right.
and so
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
are going to gravitate towards
Yeah.
that have that full-time background of, or something, or even two part-time. There's 1,000 ways to pull it off, but
Mm-hmm. I think, though, the core of our conversation comes down to managing expectations
hmm
in all directions. Managing expectations for both employers, for our
hmm
pastor, but also for our, a primary full time job.
yes.
And just trying to find the best fit for you so that you find employers that support your balance.
hmm
And then my biggest thing, which is why I asked you this in the first place, Sean, was practicing saying no.
Yes.
Because I mean, when you come down to it, we're working a full time and a part time job.
It's true. Recently I didn't say no on that. We had a change in leadership. No one wanted to step up to be the chapter director.
Oh,
So everyone just kept coming around the table to me. I'm like, really? And I didn't
you
say no. And it is
guys.
very rewarding and I enjoy doing it. But there's times I'm like, oh man, this is a lot of work.
Yes, I understand that feeling
Yes.
too.
But once again, you prioritize, and
Hmm.
I kind of told everybody, now look, here's that managing expectations. Okay,
Hmm.
this is like fifth down on the list some weeks, so just know,
Yeah, just know that. Yeah,
manage
yeah.
those expectations.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
you know,
No,
so
that
things
makes sense.
things ebb and flow,
Hmm. Yep.
especially in church. So, and
Right.
my business is seasonal. Some people out there may not have a seasonal business that they're in. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
managing expectations, managing your own time,
Hmm.
saying no, that comes into respecting your own time, saying know when to say no.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Well, do you have any other closing thoughts? Anything else you want to mention?
Um, I think we've covered pretty much. I mean, we could probably come up with more if we thought about it, but
Well, I thank you for chatting on this topic. I think it's a really important topic. I just think it's the reality, whether we like it or not. Not for everyone, but for a significant amount of church
Mhm.
ministry across the country now. And I appreciate you having this conversation with us and
Well,
sharing a little
thanks
bit
for asking me.
about how you do it. You are so welcome. Thank you. Best of luck for you as you balance Lent, Holy Week, and spring gardening season.
Yes, thanks.
Well, thank you again, Sean, for your time today.
Thank you.